Hapo kwa nini, kwa title It's 21st July 2020. Thank you for choosing Oromia Media Network. We're live on both our Facebook page and YouTube channel. My name is Asli Galgalo. Resistance and resentment is building up against Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in the Oromia region and other parts of the country, with the International Oromo Lawyers Association now calling for the revocation of the Nobel Peace Prize he was awarded last year. Extrajudicial killing, arbitrary arrest and torture of prisoners is on the rise, with the latest wave of arrests in the country like never seen before. The government says over 7,000 people have been arrested. Local sources, however, say the number is much higher than reported. Among those arrested is Chaltu Takala, who was a political activist who spent most of her time, that is 8 years, from 2008 to 2016 in prison after being accused of being a member of Oromo Liberation Front, that is OLF, which the Ethiopian government had labeled as a terrorist organization then. She was arrested and briefly detained in 2017 and 2019 when she was pregnant. She is now back in prison after being arrested 3 weeks ago after the murder of Hachalu Hundessa, separated from a 9-month-old baby who the family is saying she only gets to feed once a day. Joining me now is Dr. Enoch Gabisa, co-chair of International Oromo Lawyers Association based in New York. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us, Dr. Enoch.
Thank you very much, Asli, for inviting me.
I can't hear you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Dr. Enoch.
I hear you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
These are strange, unpredictable, and very, very confusing times. Just the other year, people were celebrating Prime Minister Abiy's Nobel Award. And now your organization, among other organizations, is asking for the revocation of the same. What is happening?
Indeed, this is a tough time for everyone who is closely observing Ethiopian politics, and especially how it intermingles with the Oromo.
Sorry, I can't hear you. I think there's a problem.
I do hear you. I can hear you, Asli. So indeed, this is a very tough time for anyone who closely observe the Ethiopian politics and how that interacts with the Oromo quest for freedom and justice. Particularly coming back to your question about the revocation of the Nobel Peace Prize, what my organization did a few days ago is to sit down and evaluate the overall peace the process and peace performance of the Prime Minister, and we found out that in fact the Prime Minister has been awarded prematurely for various reasons. Number one, the prize award was given to Abiy Ahmed not necessarily because of what he did, but because of what he potentially will be going to will be doing. That includes the stability of the regional politics and the regional peace in the area. And second, the internal peace of the country. But the fact that he made some semblance of peace, not with the entire Eritrea, but with the president of Eritrea, is not enough in our eyes. And as we all know, the prime minister does not have peace from within. He couldn't make peace with Western Oromia, Eastern Oromia, and now with the entire Oromo nation, about 40 million. So a prime who had been recognized globally now is falling so bad and running the deficit of peace inside. And most importantly, we also noted that one of the factors that gave rise to his peace recognition was his newly established peace friendship with Eritrea. But the motivating factor behind the rapprochement with Eritrea was based on anti-TPLF sentiment. It's not necessarily okay to make peace with another entity on the basis of hate for another group. This is an acceptable ground of peace negotiation. Today, the Prime Minister perceives Tigray region and Tigray leaders as the national enemy of Ethiopia. This is called treason. He should not be able to be seen as making peace with Eritrea while hating and creating animosity with his own region in Tigray. So we believe that he does not deserve to be a peace laureate, and he is someone who is against peace. So we know that requesting the revocation of his peace award might not be affirmatively taken by the Norwegian Peace Committee, but our communication, our message is really to some other entities. We are communicating to the international community. We are saying that the Prime Minister does not have peace within, and now the ongoing movement in the Horn of Africa, the conspiracy between Abiy and Isaias Afewerki to launch some form of disturbances, if you will, in that area, even though we have yet to see what it looks like. The movement of creating some military regrouping between Sudan, Eritrea, and Ethiopia is definitely something that does not support a peaceful region. So he should not deserve to be a candidate for peace. A candidate for peace prize does not kill his own people. He or she should believe in sitting at the table, discussing, finding a solution, and finding a sustainable solution. In Western Oromia, particularly 2 years ago, the conflict between the Prime Minister and the Oromo Liberation Front was believed to end, but the Prime Minister did not care to listen to the local communities. The Prime Minister did not care to listen to the Abagadas. The Prime Minister did not care to talk to the 71-member technical committee who was supposed to be making peace. So how on earth is it possible to have a Prime Minister who literally, by his actions and perceptions, stand against peace, to have to be recognized internationally as a peace laureate? That's what we believed in saying his award is premature, undeserved. We know the way the Alfred or the Norwegian committee works, that they don't have a history of revoking things or the history of retaking back the award, but we have to represent the agony of the people and tell to the world the story.
To that, like you said, you are not planning to address this to the Norwegian committee because according to the will of Alfred Nobel and also the committee, they do not have any provision for the revocation of an award. So what are you trying to achieve with this one?
The message and the communication is really different. We are telling the world, we are telling the Norwegian committee that this is the man, an embryonic dictator, authoritarian, brutal leader who you awarded a peace award. That's our message. They don't have to take it back. It does not matter. As long as the world knows, as long as the international community knows, as long as the Norwegian committee knows that the Oromo and other Ethiopian members are not okay with the way things are going now, that's what we wanted, and we have successfully achieved that.
So a lot of people have been killed in the past week and thousands arrested. How do you evaluate the legality of this arrest and the brutal force by the forces?
There has never been rule of law in Ethiopia. There has never been any semblance of legality in Ethiopia, as far as I know. I studied Ethiopian law many years ago. The practice and the law had never been in line with what the actual theory of legality says. The arrests, the detentions, arbitrary arrest, and profiling of the Oromo is going unabated. We know that the Prime Minister literally understands and he literally perceives that the Oromo people are the problem, and especially the Oromo nationalism, which means equality, democracy, and fight for justice, had been interpreted by the Prime Minister as the problem in his process to establish a unitarist Ethiopia, which in most cases looks like restoring the imperial and repressive Ethiopia. So legality had never given any place in successive Ethiopian regimes, and people had always been suspected and mass incarcerated for simply asking their rights. So what the Prime Minister is doing is he is simply following the suit of his previous predecessors. So we know this is a tough situation for Oromo people and other nations and nationalities who are in the same situation, but they have to know that this is not going to long last. This is not going to take a very long time before it comes to an end. Because the Oromo had been peacefully protesting and fighting for many decades, and particularly the last 5 years, we have seen the Oromo youth putting up their arms, empty arms, standing in front of a gun, but still requesting their demand, which is recognition of the Oromo people and their rights. So the Prime Minister is doing currently, or he is putting himself on the wrong side of history, and he is criminalizing the entire Oromo nation and the demands of the Oromo nation. And I can guarantee you that this is not going to last long.
So a lot of detainees have been complaining about the treatment they've been getting in prison, being denied family visits, being subjected to humiliating, inhumane treatments like what Yusuf Bashir and Ridwan are going through. So to that effect, the court gave orders for remedies. Do you think it will be followed through?
I have practiced law in Ethiopia, and I know the relationship that exists between police department and the court. The court in Ethiopia had never been given an iota of respect by the police or by the law enforcement. The law enforcement, which is part and parcel of the executive branch, is the most dominant entity in the justice administration. It's not only going to be Yusuf Bashir and Redwan Aman. Redwan Aman. There are dozens of cases that I can mention here in the past in the past few weeks or months is that the court had already respected their right to bail, their constitutional right to bail, but the police was, no, we're not going to be releasing them. So the judiciary in Ethiopia is the most compromised branch of the government in one way or another, and the most powerful entity in the legal or justice administration is the law enforcement or the police department, because the direct communication between the law enforcement and the intelligence community of Ethiopia is very strong. The high officials do believe and highly trust the police than the judiciary, and it's supposed to be otherwise. So even if the court gives Yusuf and Redwan some kind of remedy, temporary remedy to get access to medical treatment, is not going to be respected by the police. And I know this case personally because I am following on this case with a team Oromia Seattle who are friends and family with these two kids. And the latest information that we have is that they were denied the right to have a medical treatment. And currently they are at risk of a serious health situation. And this should worry all of us. If the police officers or the law enforcement does not give any kind of attention to the order of the court, it tells the story of how that country is being run. It tells the prerogative power of the police officers to kill and go free without impunity. And that had been the story of the Oromo in the last many decades.
So we don't expect any form of justice for these two or the 7,000 people who've been arrested?
There had never been any justice to begin with. There was no reason for them to be arrested. Second of all, the judicial history and the investigation history is always obvious. It's a trumped-up criminal charge. It's a doctored and well-cooked charge, and there is no forensic evidence, and there is no sufficient evidence to prove what they're saying. And if you see the charge behind, or the charge with which these people are accused, they were accused of criminal activities that took place after they were arrested. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them, including a friend Jawar Mohammed, Bakale Garba, are being investigated for some of the distractions and some of the violent element of the protest that took place in Shashamane. They were arrested a day or two before a Shashamane incident. There is a well-known legal principle that you cannot retroactively charge or investigate a person. A criminal charge should be investigated and should be instituted before a court of law prospectively, not retroactively. When they were arrested, most of the material elements and the most of the material elements and the mental element of the crime had not been there. They are in jail when Shashamane happened. They are in there when different elements of violence, which actually does not represent the Oromo protest, and which is not which is not the goal of the Oromo protest. When these things took place, these people are in jail. So it's not possible to link and connect between those activities or those perpetration and the individuals. So unless this is a premeditated, pre-prepared plan, a political scheme to crack down on the opposition figures, the media, that belongs to the Oromo, this has no useful and meaningful content to itself.
Let's talk about Chaltu Takala. This lady has been in prison 8 years, from 2008 to 2016, and she told the court that every time something comes up, she's amongst those arrested. And last year she was arrested, she was pregnant again. Achalu died, there was protest, she was arrested again. Now she's separated from her young baby, just 9-month-old kid, and she doesn't even get to breastfeed the baby properly because she only gets one time the whole day. So why is this lady a person of interest? Why does she keep coming up every time the government is cracking down on people?
Thank you very much, Ashley. Chaltu is the face of the Oromo suppression and the Oromo oppression. I have known Chaltu as far back as the time when she was arrested from Addis Ababa University a couple of decades ago, almost over 12, 13 years ago. She had been in and out, and the longest she had been arrested was for about 10 years. Her crime is just to be an Oromo, and a conscious Oromo, an Oromo who believes in a real democracy, a real and effective self-governance, and an Oromo who believes in Oromo justice. That's her only crime. And she is the face of how Oromos are being oppressed within the Ethiopian ideology and within the Ethiopian system, which was essentially and literally built on anti-Oromo justice movement. So it's a tragedy that she's not given the chance to breastfeed her 9 months toddler, and it's a tragedy that she had to go back to this same agony, which we all believe that we already passed that as Oromo. But thanks to the Prime Minister, who is in a race with himself, restoring and reestablishing literally the parochial Ethiopian ideology that's so hegemonic and that's built on a unitarist, a centrist political system that had a full experience of marginalizing the Oromo, that had a full experience of otherizing the Oromo. And Chaltu is a collateral damage of the entire political scheme and the entire political project of the Prime Minister and the likes of the Prime Minister, which ultimately is going to end in either having the Oromo completely crush and dismiss them from the Oromo, from the Ethiopian political process, or which at the end is going to have the Oromo win peacefully the battle of democracy, the battle of group recognition, the battle of equality, and the battle of dignity. And I am of the latter opinion.
Mm-hmm. So the protesters and those who've been killed in the past 3 weeks are being labeled extremist. And the protest, like you said, that does not represent the Oromo protest, where a lot of properties were destroyed also. So as per the government figures that were released, and even before I say this, the call for justice is also being countered. And as per government figures, they say 167 people were killed. Of course, out of this, 114 are ethnic Oromos. So why are these people who have been mostly affected by the recent crisis being labeled as if the perpetrators, or rather causing harm and conflict on other people?
Thank you. First of all, I strongly denounce any form of violence against anyone. Violence has no place in any society. And I personally do not subscribe to anything else outside of a non-violent movement. And no one should be targeted. And that's exactly the essential belief and process of the Oromo protest. During the Oromo protest, there had been elements within the Oromo protest that completely was going against the essential implementation process of the Oromo protest itself. And we believe that this had been planted in the Oromo protest from an outside group who was in the process of delegitimizing the Oromo protest. In 2014, the Oromo protest was successful. Between 2014 and 2018, the Oromo protest was successful because it was entirely non-violent movement. The Prime Minister knew about this, the Ethiopian intelligence community knew about this, and they are in a race with themselves to make look like the Oromo protest is a violent movement. The same way we have a Black Lives Movement, medias and those who are against Black Lives Movement are trying to portray Black Lives Movement as an extremist and radical movement, which actually is not. So the Oromo protest is not an extremist movement. It's not an extremist political project of the Oromo. It is a project that desires and that seeks to achieve recognition for the Oromo in the Ethiopian political project, that seeks to find a fair share for the Oromo in the national political project. And it's most of all, it's a process and project that seeks to restore multinational federal democratic constitutional system. So, having said this, what we have to know is the battle is not between extremists and moderates in Ethiopia. That kind of spectrum had never existed. That kind of political relationship had never existed. What had existed in Ethiopia for many years and many decades is a battle of politics between the marginalized and those who marginalizes. It's a battle between those who dominated and those who had a hegemony, a national hegemony over the culture, the wealth, the knowledge, and the identity, and between those who seeks to have a group recognition, a self-recognition, a true federalism, a self-administration principle, and a constitutional principle. So this is the battle that had already existed in Ethiopia, and the Oromos had been fighting peacefully for nothing but have a self-recognition. If that makes me, or if that makes Oromo protest an extremist, I am an extremist. But I strongly believe that the Oromo protest has nothing to do with radicalization. It has nothing to do with extremism. It's rather those who are on power, who are resorting to force, unproportional amount of use of force to crack down, to crush, and to completely dismiss the question, the national question of the Oromo, the question of employment, the question of joblessness, the question of land, and many other who are supposed to be called extremists. So I guarantee you that this is a battle of controlling the narrative. It's a battle of controlling the media narrative about the Oromo protests. And thanks to God, the Oromo had their own media, the Oromo had their own outlet to tell the entire story.
Thank you very much. So there's this hyper focus on ethnic violence in Ethiopia, and some are saying this is actually an attempt to make Ethiopia ethnicity free. That is, of course, getting rid of the multinational federalism. What is your take?
Any politics is based on ethnicity, anywhere, anytime. Politics is all about organization, all about grassroots organization and movement. And grass movement do have their own initial ethnic group. I'll break it down for you. Those who say the Oromo protest or the Oromo movement is just about ethnic movement, and when they try to portray themselves as ethnic free based on Ethiopia, that's completely artificial way of narrating the story. The Ethiopian ideology, which they say is free from any ethnic organization or from any ethnic identification, is based and built on one single ethnic narrative, which is mostly from the north, and it's built on one religious system. It's built on a single flag system. It's built on a single national emblem. So anyone who requests a local autonomy, a group recognition, and anyone who believes in diversity is automatically branded and labeled by those forces as ethnic group. Those are hiding under the Ethiopian identity, but their real color, their true color, and their real identity is also ethnic based. Wherever we go, politics starts with a group of people who are close to each other, not based on ideas, but based on might be kinship, it might be a family, and that's how movement grows. That's how nation states are being built. So the difference in Ethiopia is the Oromos are obviously openly saying we 40 million Oromos do have the same heritage, the same language, the same culture, and we can be a people of our own. We need to be recognized as a group. That does not make us ethnicity-based politics. And what's wrong with being ethnic-based politics? It has never been criminalized. The fact that the Oromos do have ethnic understanding or ethnic approach to the politics does not mean anything, as long as they are requesting a self-recognition. And those who are hiding under the Ethiopian brand of the politics are also more ethnic than any other one. The problem is, if this positive political force is based on a hate for each other, that's where I don't agree. But the fact that ethnic recognition and ethnic self-rule, which actually is in the Constitution itself, should not be seen as a demonized factor. So it's about a race for the narrative. Again, trying to portray or draw a parallel understanding between the Ethiopian ethnic-based political organizations and the Yugoslavia inter-ethnic fighting of the 1990s. Because when forces which disagree with the Oromo cause want to portray or communicate their narrative to the world, they try to use the negative examples of how ethnicity ended up in conflict in countries like Yugoslavia or Eastern Europe, right?
Thank you. And some are also lending a religious dimension to this Ethiopian crisis. Some are saying Jawar, they're even labeling Jawar as an Islamist and having Islamist agenda. As you know, this narrative sells very fast, and especially to the West. What does this mean for the Oromo struggle?
It bothers me a lot. Jawar has never been anything else except a liberal, a Democrat, a constitutional person who studied at Stanford and went to Columbia University. And he read and studied under globally eminent professors who are known for their constitutional democracy research and scholarship. The fact that Jawar had a last name called Muhammad shouldn't be used against this guy. And to begin with, who said having a Muslim name should qualify somebody for something unnecessarily extremist? That's the world, the unfair global political order that we live in, from east to west. But zooming down that on the way the Ethiopian camp labeled Jawar as extremist is so concerning. The story of Jawar is the story of the Oromo people. And anywhere the Oromo people go, whether it's inside Ethiopia or outside of Ethiopia, there is always this alarming narrative that say, oh, majority of you are Muslim. So what? My question is, people should not be targeted, and their perception, their belief of politics should not be doubted because of which religion they belong to. As a Christian man who was born and raised in a Protestant family, I had never been doubted, or I have never been seen as an extremist, even when sometimes I am more radical than the other friend, or than Jawar, for example. But this is a sad reality of how anyone associated with the name Muslim can easily end up in that unfair global political order. That's also one battle that the Oromos are fighting. The Oromos are indigenous society with their organic and indigenous political organizations and political belief. Gada, for example, does not belong to any religion. It does not belong to the Christianity. It does not belong to the Islam. It belongs to the Oromo. Politically and religious neutral. That empowers the Oromo to organize themselves based on their organic knowledge. And that's what Jawari studied. Beside the Western constitutional democracy that he studied in Stanford and in Columbia, he is well coached by the Abagadas, who taught him the real and organic knowledge of the Oromo political organization system. So calling this kind of person an Islamist or a radicalist or an extremist is the latest effort and the latest attempt by the Ethiopian or by the pro-Ethiopian imperial and repressive system to delegitimize and to give a color of religion the latest movement of the Oromo. And that had never been successful, and that's not going to be successful. Because again, I will state this again. The Oromo cause and the movement for equality, justice, and democracy of the Oromo people had been something that were there many decades ago, and it's here today, and it's going to be here in the future. And one way or another, the Oromo's real definition of self-governance and justice will be given attention by those who closely watch what's going on. So there can be different kind of branding and naming and shaming of those who are the main actors and figures in this process. But history tells us that the Christian and the Muslim Oromo had always fought against the domination and the oppression of the Ethiopian system side by side. And the recent attack against the identity and the religion of our people is something that really will not hold any kind of water.
I'll take you back to the demonstration that took place in Washington, D.C. over the weekend, and some Oromo demonstrators were shot at. So is there any progress? Was anyone apprehended?
As far as I know, I have not followed on the latest news, but I would like to say a few words about that particular incident. So they try to portray the Oromo protest and the Oromo movement as a violent movement. But what we witnessed in DC is that the Oromos from all kinds of states came together and they marched peacefully. They communicated their message, and then they went back home. They went back to their hotels. And young kids who just wanted to explore the local community, the DC local situation, went out and they had their Oromo outfits, the Oromo cultural and political flag with themselves, and they were singled out, and the suspects were motivated by hate for the identity of these kids, and they shot at them. They had no history of contact before. They don't know each other before. It was simply the Oromo cultural and flag outfit that drew attention of the suspect to shoot at these people. This tells who is violent. Is it the Oromo people who had been in this movement for a long time, or is it those who are reacting to the Oromo movement who are being violent? So the incident in DC shows anyone who is interested to understand who is violent and who is not. And even in a country where there is law and order, where there is rule of law, the Oromos are still facing violence of some degree. Can you imagine the violence that the Oromos are facing in Ethiopia, where there is no rule of law, where there is no camera, where there is no law enforcement effectively operating? That's the reality of the Oromo. So to answer your question, the latest that I have is that the Fairfax PD are still investigating, and as International Oromo Lawyers Group, we are preparing a declaration or a statement explaining the context of the incident. We have not been there. We don't know what happened except reading the news that had been released by the Fairfax Police Department, but we are we're preparing a declaration, expertise declaration of the context of how this thing came about. What happened during the day? What happened during the day when the Oromos were protesting? We knew that the pro-government rally, which had been also organized by the Ethiopian embassy in DC, had been confronting physically a peaceful Oromo protest here in DC. So we are going to be giving the investigators, the detective group, that political and social background. And the goal is to show that the motivation and the criminal intention behind the incident is something that's related to the identity of the victims. Had the victims, had they have no open expression of who they are, had they have no flag of the Oromo, there was no problem. There could not have been this incident. So the conclusion is that the motivation behind the crime is because of who they are. That's their group, and that's exactly the definition of hate crime, and that's what where we're trying to reach.
You just said there was counter-protest by pro-government, people, and we saw pictures of people visiting the Ethiopian embassy in DC with Ambassador Fitzel Maraga, and he posted actually on Facebook. And so people were asking, does the government have time to actually listen to praises rather than listening to people's grievances?
What that incident, or what that meeting of the ambassador with the pro-Ethiopian government rally, is the ultimate expression of how Ethiopian government sees and understands the Oromo. The Oromo had grievances, and they had never been approached by the embassy, or they had never been welcomed by the embassy to ask what the protest is about. The embassy was rather quick enough to operate and coordinate a pro-government rally, and then stage some kind of performance to show to the camera that there is a pro-Ethiopian government rally going on, and they also the ambassador received the demand and the statements from the organizers of the pro-Ethiopian government rally. That's indirectly telling the Oromos, who were protesting outside a few miles away, that they do not belong to the Ethiopian embassy. And that's not the Oromo embassy. It's an embassy for a limited kind of group who are only there to support the government. That's actually the expression, or the example of how Oromos are being treated. The ambassador never cared to ask why Oromos are protesting. He never cared to receive any kind of statement. He never came out to take the statement of, or the demand of, the Oromo protesters. He did not care any of those. What he cared was to receive and take picture and take videos with those who are a pro-government rally organizers. So what does that tell us? This tells us that only a group of people or group of other Ethiopians who support and who agrees with the policy and the politics of the government are the ones who are Ethiopians, are the ones who deserve to be treated as Ethiopians. And the rest majority, like the Oromo and other nationality, as long as they keep protesting and resisting the oppressive system, they are not considered in the national political project. That's exactly what's happening in Ethiopia as we speak.
Mm-hmm. So we told our audiences that we'd be coming on today, and they had a series of questions for you. But the first one is they're very concerned about the reaction of the Oromo opposition parties in Oromia. They're saying they've neglected the people, especially this time of crisis. They have not put out any statement, yet members of the political parties have been arrested. And even the party leaders, like OFC leaders, are in prison. Why do you think they're quiet?
I really cannot say anything to that, but here's what I can tell the Oromo people. Stand your ground. Retool, regroup yourself. Don't expect anything from anyone. This is a liberation movement. This is an equality movement in which each and every single Oromo person has a responsibility in it. Don't expect anyone to come and organize you. Don't expect anyone to come and write a letter on your behalf. That had not worked before, and it's not going to be working. Take off your expectation from those who are sitting ducks. Take off your expectation from those who had been in the process of being a loyal opposition. They had never done anything for you. Do it for yourself this time around. Reorganize yourself locally. Regroup yourself. Retool yourself. At the end of the day, equality movement, liberation movement is a collective movement. It's a collective process, and it's a collective outcome. So you can understand when I say this, that how angry I am with those who are supposed to be acting at this moment, but they ended up just being a sitting duck. They ended up being some form of non-governmental organizations, not even a political leaders. This is a moment that desires leadership, particularly from the oppositions. People are in despair. People are becoming hopeless. The strife is going to the level of some kind of civil war. And that's not an exaggeration. This is a moment when people need leadership, and nobody is showing up. Nobody is stepping up. It's individual activists. It's individual people who are running here and there, trying to give people the hope. So if the political leaders, if the oppositions are not doing enough, they do not deserve to be the opposition. That's why I say the people who are in the process of demanding the equality and justice should reorganize themselves to some form of credible and sustainable entity that can sit and discuss if need be.
Like that's you said, people are actually frustrated and they're desperate for leadership. So Oromos online and back home are saying, Oromos should unite, the leaders, the elites, the activists, to pull them through this crisis. But no one is, like you said, everyone is just pulling away, and guys are acting as individuals. Why can't people come together? And there are also concerns of the Oromo struggle lacking clear direction. So has Jawar's arrest created a vacuum?
I don't believe Jawar's, yes, Jawar, obviously Jawar had been the most significant and the most impactful person in the Ethiopian politics, and particularly in the Oromo politics. His absence is obviously being felt. There's no question, and there's no doubt. But I don't agree with the with the assertion that his absence had created a vacuum. When Jawar was arrested, there are a couple of Jawars who can step up collectively. It's going to be a big shoes to fill, obviously. But the thing, though, is there are colleagues of Jawar, there are friends of Jawar back home and in the diaspora who can move collectively and attempt to fill that gap. Does his absence really impact? Yes, it does have an impact, a significant one. But it does not mean that the Oromo movement is built in and around Jawar. It does not have to be understood. No one should not be understood that way. What we have to do is, there are leaders at different levels. There are leaders who are quiet and silent. They need to come out. They need to step up. This is a moment that needs someone to to reveal himself or herself. So when I say this, again, it has to be understood that as Oromos, we are in uncharted territory. and the leadership responsibility should match and should be proportional to what we are in. There are different leadership at different structure and levels. And those things are moment now to come out, to show the people some kind of direction and hope. There is already a meeting of mind among all Oromos and among all Oromo leaderships. But we have to also remember that most of the leaders are in jail. If anyone wants to talk to the Oromo leaders, the first thing that we have to do is those who are in jail should be released. And half of the leaders are in jail and half of the leaders are in hiding. That's why it seems the situation is not manageable from the outside point of view, but it's manageable because Oromo people, as being egalitarian kind of society, they believe in a decentralized leadership, in a decentralized way of organizing oneself. But again, this is a moment that calls for a purely hierarchical political leadership and political organization, which should be clear enough to give guidance and directions. And I believe that is actively in operation, and that's something that we're going to be witnessing in the coming days ahead as the Oromo protest continues.
Thank you. Like I said, and like you said, people need direction now. And they're saying, we need actions. We need to see things that are taking place. So do we expect to see someone coming up soon to show direction to the Keros and Garos back home?
The leadership is back home. The organizers of the Kero are back home.
Mm-hmm.
What is outside in the diaspora is an amplifier. Activists who speak on behalf of those leaders because they cannot speak up. They have no platform to speak up, and they are not allowed to speak up. So when Jawar was highly influencing and to a greater extent leading the Oromo protest, nobody did appoint Jawar. Nobody had ever voted for Jawar. His performance, his excellence, and his capacity to deliver gave him that privilege. And people bought into his leadership. The same thing is going to be true. Mm-hmm. There are different groups, actors, who are moving with a meeting of mind, with a general consensus. So whichever group or whichever entity is consistently delivering, is consistently communicating, and is consistently engaging in a meaningful interaction with the people, is going to be given some type of ear. So that's how it works. Any kind of movement, any kind of popular and social movement depends on whoever is delivering, whoever is doing what they're doing with excellence, with commitment and dedication. It's not a democracy where you vote your protest leader. Protest leaders emerge on their own performance. So what we see now is, obviously we cannot see a figure who is going to be equivalent to Jawar, who is emerging and who is talking and leading and guiding. What we see is a solid group, decentralized group, well-grounded, who is going to be communicating with the Keros back home and Keros outside of Oromia and guiding these people in the coming few days ahead. And one thing that I have to remind the viewers or the Oromo youth or the Oromo people in general is the fact that Jawar is in jail does not mean that we are discussing post-Jawar. Jawar phenomenon had not started yet. The same way Bakale Garba was a leader of the Oromo protest back home, while sitting behind the bar, while sitting in jail, the same thing is going to apply. The leaders, those who are going to give direction, are going to be essentially coming from the prison itself. Being a leader does not mean being out there in the public and being on the media. Not necessarily. By being in the jail, by being behind the bar, people can still lead a movement. That had been done, and that's going to be happening. So we have to remind ourselves that these are still the Oromo political leaders who are going to be influential and impactful in leading and giving this movement a direction, a clear direction, even when they are in jail. So we have to think about that as well.
Thank you. It's been weeks of unrest, and the government announced that normalcy has resumed in the country. Is this the case?
Say that again?
It's been weeks of unrest. Of course, the government announced that normalcy has resumed in the country. Yet we know a lot of property was destroyed, people were killed, thousands are behind bars. How is this normal?
Yes, it's been a week of unrest, and there is no internet still outside of Addis Ababa, outside of Finfinne. What the government is trying to portray is as if the situation is under control. We know this, we have been here, we've done that before. There are different steps of controlling protest movement and portraying, especially when the country is donor dependent, to communicate with their donors how the country is functioning. For one, we have no clear information, or we have no clear evidence of what's happening and what's not happening in the country. It's completely in a lockdown. We're trying to make sense of what happened the past few weeks or the past few days. But here's one thing that I would tell the international community or the donor group or the partners of Ethiopia. As long as the Oromos are marginalized, as long as the Oromo youths are not given a fair share of understanding of their concern, the Oromo people are always resisting. They are always protesting peacefully. So the fact that the government is going out on Western media and telling that things are under control is in fact a misguided way of communicating to the outside world. They are trying to create an artificial peace, telling their donors and telling their partners that we are in control, we are still a government, we're still legitimate type of government. They have never been legitimate, they have never been voted into the office, they have never known to sit down and discuss and find solution. So as long as the regime continues to see the Oromo as a problem of Ethiopia, there is always unrest. That can come in a different form and shape. It can be a quiet and silent unrest. It can be open in the public. It can be anything else. But I can guarantee you that the essence of it is a peaceful one, and one that's going to be sustainable. So as of now, we're going to be looking at what is happening on the periphery, and we have no clear information of that because of the internet shutdown and the communication shutdown. And I am aware that the Cairo are calling for a different round, a second round of protests. So the Ethiopian government is rather expected to sit down and ask one simple question: what do the Oromo people want? No government over many years had managed to ask itself, why are Oromo people protesting? That's a real question that had to be asked, not the people, but themselves. And that's my recommendation.
So we've had 3 weeks of protest across the world. What are some of the achievements of this protest? And I was to ask whether we should expect another round of protest from the areas, and of course you've confirmed that. And what will be the demands of the protest that the areas are planning?
The Oromo protest is national, transnational, and global. It's a trinity of interjurisdictional and interactive movement that seeks to achieve, one, tell the international community that we have a monster in the country who is leading the country down the hill by trying to restore oppressive and imperial Ethiopia, which we fought against for many years. That had been successfully done through the global Oromo protest from Europe to the US to Canada. And these are going to be happening continuously in the coming few days and months. Many rounds of protests are going to be coming. Inside the country, there are going to be rounds of protest. There are going to be rounds of resistance as long as the leaders are in jail, as long as the Oromos are incarcerated in mass, as long as the Ethiopian government continues to engage in extrajudicial killing. The Oromos are resisting. The Oromos are protesting. So the demands are clear. Immediately release the Oromo political prisoners. Restore independent medias. Cease and desist from a national political project of restoring imperial and suppressive and oppressive Ethiopian system. And many other similar demands. So as long as these demands are not met, the protest will continue. And the goal of this, especially in the diaspora, is to show, which had successfully been done, that the Ethiopian Prime Minister, especially Abiy Ahmed, who was a Peace Nobel or awardee or a Peace Laureate, is actually a dictator, authoritarian, who is engaged in killing his own people, who is not interested in a sustainable peace. Since Abiy came to power, the political assassination from General Saare to Dr. Ambacho, who is the president of the Amara region, and the engineer Saman Bello of the Nile Dam or the Ethiopian Great Renaissance Dam, shows us the essence of the Ethiopian political leadership. We had assassinations of high profile on the rise. Hachalu Hundessa is the latest victim of that. And there had never been a meaningful investigation into this. Mm-hmm. That shows us that this leadership is essentially defective, is essentially exhibits deficiency of some sort. So that had been communicated to the international community through this protest. So one more time I would say this: the Oromo protest is national, transnational, and global.
We're coming to the end of the interview, but the last question is now, what is next for Oromos, and what is your message to Oromos back home, abroad, and Ethiopians in general?
What's next for Oromo and other community members of Ethiopia is, we do not deserve to be part of a problem in this country. Each and every single one should ask themselves, how can I be part of a solution? Being part of a solution demands one thing. We need to ask a question: why are the Oromo people not satisfied in Ethiopia? What is literally wrong with the way this country is constituted. And why are the Oromo people protesting? If any non-Oromo is interested in a continued existence of that country, a peaceful existence of that country, the first thing they have to ask is, how can this be collectively resolved in honest way, a genuine way, in a sustainable way? But going about this, trying to delegitimize, trying to outsource and find outsourced enemy for the Oromo protest is not part of a solution. That, in fact, is part of a problem. That's my message to the non-Ethiopians. Second message to the non-Ethiopians, either in Oromia or outside of Oromia, is the Oromo protest or the Oromo movement in general is not about targeting or singling out a certain ethnic group. The Oromo never had a problem with other ethnic groups. In fact, it's the Oromo people who understands the agony and the suffering of ethnic groups. So the Amaras in Oromia, the Tigrays in Oromia are our brothers. They are our sisters. They are supposed to be on board with the Oromo quest for justice and equality. When it's good for the Oromo, it's good for them as well. So the Oromo protest is something that transcends beyond itself. It's about a group existence. Those who lived in Oromia are part and parcel of us. They are our blood as well. They are our family as well. So this intention, which is malicious, to separate those in Oromia region as if they are targeted by their Oromo friends and portraying this on the international media, is going to be part of the problem. That's one thing. So when it's good for the Oromo, it's also good for those who live in Oromia and those who live outside of Oromia. We have to see it this way. My message to the Oromo is, obviously, we are not in a regular time. We have never imagined to have Oromia Media Network raided and closed. We've never imagined the giant Oromo political leaders to be arrested on a trump-up charge. We have never imagined for a prominent artist, activist Achalu to be gunned down and to be used for some political scheme. We've not ever imagined what had transpired in the last few weeks, but here we are. So the only solution to this is stand together, resist, protest, because it's our natural duty and it's our natural right to seek justice. We don't seek justice from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. We seek justice from our own. We seek justice and we seek democracy and multinational federal system by organizing ourselves and making ourselves a credible force that has to be reckoned with. We have to make ourselves the force that cannot be ignored in any kind of project, in any kind of discussion in that country. That's what Oromo protest had come into. It has come into a force that had to be reckoned with. And this should have a visible and a public face, well organized, ready to lead, ready to bring democracy, ready to transition the country. Unless we show ourselves, unless we portray ourselves as a credible, well-organized force that can step up and fill the leadership gap created by the current regime, the protest and the movement is going to take more than we expect. So let's stick together, listen to each other, listen to the local Kairos, and listen to what's being read on the media. and ignore call for violence and show that we are truly a peaceful Oromo protest movement who cannot back down, who cannot be compromised by anything else unless we get our ultimate destiny. That's a group recognition and group self-administration and group self-governance. That's the ultimate destination. And then that's when we live with harmony. That's when we become a force of change in that
Thank
country.
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Enoch. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for inviting me on your show.
Galatomi nagawag ake noel.
Galatomi Tlenagati.
Galatom. That was Dr. Enoch Gabisa, co-chair of International Oromo Lawyers Association. This is Oromo Media Network. Thank you for choosing and staying with us. My name is Ashley Gelgalo. See you tomorrow, same place, same time.